On a cool, quiet night of June 3rd, 2019, 11:38 p.m. at 1400 block of Alex Drive, near the intersection with Marlowe Street, Corpus Christi, Texas. Marcus was walking home after clocking out at a late shift cleaning crew at a downtown diner. He lived with his father, Isaiah, in a two-bedroom duplex on 3201 Marlowe Street, just 3 blocks from where the accident occurred. Drawn to a streetlight that had blown 2 nights prior, he paused beneath it to fiddle with his phone. Drew Bancroft was out with friends, a white late-model SUV weaving in and out of traffic along Alex Drive. Several patrol dash cams and private CCTV from Bayview Automotive, 1222 Alex Drive, recorded the SUV swerving at unnatural speed. At 11:38, footage shows the vehicle clipping a curb and then striking a figure in the street. The car did not stop. Ambulances arrived in minutes. Marcus was rushed to Christus Spawn Hospital, pronounced dead at 12:26 a.m. A tangle of witnesses gave conflicting statements. One said the driver stopped briefly, then fled. Another insisted the SUV never slowed. The first police report listed hit and run, pending further investigation. Within 48 hours, the Bancroft name entered the narrative. Senator Richard Bancroft, a 3-term Republican representing a coastal district and enjoying a reputation for law and order rhetoric, called for prayers publicly and privately exchanged condolences with Isaiah. The senator seemed sincere, Isaiah would later tell an investigator, but he also moved like a man checking how the wind blew. Corpus Christi police initially considered the case an open hit and run. Then, on June 6th, county investigators reviewed traffic camera footage and a security feed from Bayview Automotive that caught the license plate, partially obscured but clear enough for identification software. The plate, registered to a Bancroft Family Company vehicle, matched the SUV seen on camera. 2 nearby hotel cameras captured the SUV entering the service road at 11:32. A bartender at the Lucky Pelican reported seeing Drew and friends arguing in the parking lot earlier that night. Despite these leads, the county prosecutor, Jeanette Price, announced on June 12th that the district attorney's office would not pursue felony charges immediately, citing insufficient evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt the intent to flee or the identity of the driver. The local paper printed the headline, "Investigation continues. No arrest in teen's death." Behind the scenes, documents later revealed, through a public records lawsuit, that Bancroft family attorneys had met with the DA days before that press conference. Senator Bancroft's influence rippled through City Hall, lobbying allies in the county. A friendly judge who had, in the past, sat on charity boards with the senator, and campaign donors who were quick to send letters praising the senator's public service. For Isaiah, nothing about the official response felt like grief. It felt like erasure. Isaiah Eze was not a man of spectacle. An immigrant from Lagos, Nigeria, who had come to Texas via a frayed passport and a work ethic, he ran Eze's Auto Repair on 1824 Port Street, 2 neighborhoods east of downtown. He worked on family cars and ex-fleet pickups. He was the kind of mechanic who knew a driver by their oil habits and a rhythm of a failing alternator. Marcus was his pride, a senior in high school, bright, quick, and always the first to volunteer at the church food pantry. In the months after Marcus's death, Isaiah's grief hardened. He appeared to friends as a man stripped down to bone and purpose. He attended every hearing. He demanded the CCTV be made public. He filed complaints, he shouted at town hall meetings, and he walked the halls of the courthouse until security asked him to leave. When the case stalled and the paperwork grew thick with polite refusals, Isaiah's anger turned toward action. On November 2nd, 2019, 4 months after the accident, Isaiah confronted Drew at a private fundraiser held for a downtown arts center on Belmont Avenue. Witnesses later described an escalating scene. Isaiah's voice raw, accusations flung like embers. Drew, guarded by a small cluster of friends and an aide, denied knowledge of events. Security intervened. Isaiah left. 4 days later, the police charged Isaiah with assault with intent to intimidate after a complaint from a Bancroft aide. The complaint described a menacing exchange but no physical injuries. A week later, the DA upgraded charges to conspiracy to commit assault after testimony from an anonymous witness. Many longtime community members felt the charges were thin and filed by political muscle. An undercurrent of suspicion grew. Was the state weaponizing law to silence a grieving father? Isaiah was convicted in a climate that suggested one narrative: the powerful protect their own. He received a sentence of 5 years, citing prior confrontations and public danger. The judge, a jurist with a conservative record and a history of low tolerance for public disturbance, said in his remarks that the rule of law must be respected by all. Isaiah protested his innocence to the end, claiming he'd only spoken words of sorrow and righteous anger. In prison, Isaiah ate and slept, reading law briefs and studying the files he had managed to convince a public defender to save for him. He befriended other inmates with similar grievances, men who had seen the system tilt and learned that anger, if not guided, destroyed as effectively as any bullet. Those friendships would later be called contacts in the press. Released on September 14, 2024, 5 years and 3 months since his sentence began, Isaiah emerged older, but his eyes were steel. At a vigil held at First Street Presbyterian, where community members gathered under banners reading "Justice for Marcus," Isaiah made a quiet, cold promise. "You took my boy," he said, voice steady. "You built towers on the backs of men like me. I will not be a ghost watching you sleep." He did not speak of bombs or murder. He spoke in terms of repayment and revelation. "You will see your names in the light," he said. "You will be accounted for, one way or another." To his supporters, the vow was righteous. To his enemies, it was ominous. When asked during subsequent interviews to outline his plan, Isaiah spoke of 3 pillars: expose, disrupt, and testify. He described them in moral and logistical terms: how to gather proof of corruption, how to disturb the comfortable flow of campaign funds without causing physical harm, and how to bring witnesses to court. He refused to recount anything that would meaningfully instruct someone on committing violence or evading law enforcement. Isaiah swore to collect documents, recordings, and witnesses that demonstrated how political power had intervened in his case and in others. He intended to use legal avenues where possible: public records requests, whistleblower statements, and media partnerships. He intended nonviolent disruption of public events, targeted civil disobedience that would bring press to corners where shadows lived. He wanted to make the inconvenient inconvenient for the convenient. He planned to secure sworn statement from those inside the senator's circle who had knowledge but not the courage. He intended to create a chain of testimony that prosecutors couldn't ignore. This framework is morally and narratively compelling and, crucially, can be executed in many ways that are lawful: public records, press, peaceful protest. But what followed in the months after his release blurred lines. Isaiah's actions were principled at first. He worked with investigative reporters at the Corpus Herald, handing over documents and leading them to former staffers who were willing to speak. He filed motions to unseal emails and memos. The press began to publish thin, damning episodes of influence: a series of text exchanges hinting at a bail recommendation, a meeting request between the senator's aide and the prosecutor, invoices for legal fees funneled through a third-party firm. But Isaiah also used intimidation: phone calls in the middle of the night to staffers, anonymous packages left at offices, and a network of former inmates and community activists who would create disturbances at events. He called these reminders. In some cases, they were small: leaflets outside homes of major donors, flash demonstrations at campaign fundraisers. In others, they skirted legality and morality: a truck parked for days outside a judge's neighborhood carrying a sign, a PA system with recordings of witness statements left blaring outside a political operative's office until the police responded. The city's tone shifted. Some citizens hailed Isaiah as a renegade crusader. Others whispered fearfully about what limits he might overstep. Isaiah did not act alone. He surrounded himself with a ragged coalition, some loyal, some opportunistic, each with a past and an ethic that complicated the morality of their cause. One of such was Nora Alvarez, a parish social worker who had long sympathized with Isaiah's grief. Stern and principled, Nora became the group's public coordinator, organizing protests, liaising with journalists, and ensuring actions remained, to the extent possible, nonviolent. She had a law degree she never used. Instead, she used her contacts to file records requests and to advise on permitted protest zones. Another person was Tommy Ace Franklin, a former mechanic turned community organizer, a man Isaiah met inside the county jail. Ace had a gift for logistics, reserving trucks for lawful parades, arranging sound equipment, and recruiting volunteers for leafleting. Ace had a temper, but insisted he would never cross a line that made him complicit in bodily harm. Maya Lynn, an investigative reporter at the Corpus Herald who had previously written about political donations. Maya's role was crucial. She vetted documents, corroborated witness statements, and published pieces that amplified Isaiah's revelations. She operated with journalistic ethics, but also with a belief that the public deserved to know was also part of his team. Also part of the team was George Tillman, a retired state clerk who had lost his pension after a bureaucratic favor that benefited a political ally. Bitter and watchful, George supplied memory and a stack of names and invoices. He provided the group with leads on procurement irregularities and campaign billing anomalies. There were also 3 unnamed former inmates, men who had served time with Isaiah and who operated as a security presence at certain protests. They were loyal, but also a liability. Their presence made police nervous, and when provocative leaflets and late-night calls started, these men were often the ones identified and questioned. This group held weekly meetings in a rented hall on 4102 Port Street. Trainings consisted largely of role-playing, how to speak to press, how to safely collect public documents, how to maintain communications while respecting privacy laws. They practiced de-escalation techniques and how to film public interactions for transparency. The trainings were not military drills or how-to lessons for sabotage. They focused on civic action and evidence collection. If the narrative were to imagine illicit training, I will not describe it. Instead, the story highlights that the group's most dangerous skill was an uncanny ability to be persistent, to gather disparate threads, and to marshal public exposure. As the months progressed, small clues converged into a larger picture. Unexplained transfers in accountant's ledger obtained via subpoena showed transfers from a Bancroft-affiliated PAC to a shell vendor that, in turn, paid a legal team adjacent to the DA's office. The amounts were irregular. A once-private calendar entry showed a meeting between an aide to the senator and an assistant DA 2 days after the accident. The aide's notes referenced damage control and family sensitivity. It was also discovered that Bayview Automotive's CCTV footage had a 3-minute segment mysteriously corrupted. A technician later testified that the camera had been intentionally clipped to remove a period when the SUV was in view. Later, one of the senator's former drivers, Karen Holcomb, came forward after Isaiah and Maya spent months building trust. Karen told investigators that she had been asked to move the Bancroft family vehicle days after the crash and to make sure heavy-duty mud flaps were installed to obscure wheel marks. Karen's account matched dirt tracks found by investigators near the scene, tracks that appeared inconsistent with the official report. Each clue mounted public pressure. The Corpus Herald ran a series entitled Privilege and Plates, and opinion columns accused the DA's office of a hush. The senator went on morning radio to deny any impropriety and to praise law enforcement. He called Isaiah's actions tragic and unlawful. On March 11th, 2025, a whistleblower from within the county clerk's office provided Maya with a set of scan memos. They were dry, legalistic, but damning. Drafts of a no prosecution recommendation and a note about discretionary dismissal due to political considerations. The memo's metadata showed it had been created by a user account tied to an associate of Senator Bancroft. This leak forced the DA to convene a special review. The state attorney general opened an inquiry. Isaiah had achieved something he wanted: increased scrutiny. But it came at a cost. In the adrenaline of victory, his network made missteps. In April, 2 men affiliated with Isaiah's group were arrested for leaving intimidating messages on a donor's voicemail, profanity and threats that the men later said were bluster. The arrests renewed public debate. Was Isaiah a righteous lion or a dangerous demagogue? The state's attorneys, sensing political liability, re-examined charges against Drew Bancroft. Under increasing pressure, the DA announced a grand jury review in May 2025. When the grand jury convened, testimony and exhibits painted a more complete picture. CCTV, witness statements, the ledger entries, the corrupted footage, and the calendar notes. The panel returned an indictment. Not for murder or manslaughter, the evidence still did not show intent, but for felony hit and run, obstruction of justice, and tampering with evidence against Andrew Bancroft. Arrest warrants were issued. Within hours of the indictment, Senator Bancroft held a press conference. He called the grand jury's decision politically motivated and stated the family would fight the charges. The contrast between his public defiance and his private scrambling, phone calls to old donors and legal strategists, emphasized the complicated dance of power. Isaiah watched the court proceedings like a man watching a dam crack. He had wanted justice for Marcus. Now it seemed the law might deliver something resembling it. But he had not wanted his crusade to become vindictive. He had wanted accountability, not vengeance. In the days that followed, an unknown envelope was delivered to the DA's office with a photo, the Bayview CCTV with a clear image of the black SUV and a legible license plate. The envelope contained no return address. Investigators treated it as a new clue. It was later revealed that the image had been in Isaiah's files. He had obtained it from a source in Bayview when they cleaned out old hard drives. The revelation that Isaiah possessed this critical image further polarized public view. Supporters argued he was simply a citizen gathering evidence. Critics said he had violated privacy and possibly chain of custody rules. A small but influential coalition of lawyers argued the image could be considered tainted. In the end, the prosecution used the photo as corroboration rather than sole evidence. Drew Bancroft was arraigned in July 2025. The trial was messy. Prominent defense attorneys clawed at witness credibility. Jurors were sequestered. The senator's public image took damage, but he retained a loyal base. Isaiah watched each court date from the gallery. The prosecutor occasionally thanked him publicly and privately for the pressure that had led to evidence being re-examined. But others whispered that the process had been messy because of Isaiah's pressure. Evidence chain issues, public leaks, and the intimidation episodes that had arisen around his protests. On October 2nd, 2025, the jury returned a verdict. Drew Bancroft was found guilty of misdemeanor hit-and-run and obstruction, but not felony charges. He was sentenced to probation, community service, and a suspended fine. The verdict enraged and saddened many, who felt the penalty did not match the life lost. Isaiah's reaction was complicated. In a public statement, he said the sentence was not enough, but he also told a reporter he would not become a monster. Later interviews, however, showed the tension inside him, the satisfaction of seeing a measure of accountability and the aching emptiness of knowing nothing could bring Marcus back. In the months after sentencing, the senator's political future dimmed. Several donors pulled funding. Ethics committees opened inquiries into his campaign staff. Senator Bancroft chose not to seek re-election, citing personal reasons, but the public knew better. His reputation had been compromised. Isaiah did not revel in the senator's retirement. The victory tasted thin. At a memorial on June 3, 2026, the 7th anniversary of Marcus's death, Isaiah spoke with weary honesty. Justice, he said, is a medicine that heals the living only if it cures the cause. We got little medicine. But what are we if the disease of privilege and cover-ups keeps returning? He had not achieved the total accountability he had once imagined. He had, however, provoked a civic conversation and a limited legal response that might, in time, be the seed for more systemic reform.